it going, people, and welcome back to another Web3 build. So in this video we will be solving a real interview assessment for a Web3 front-end developer job. This one is by Biconomy and they require us to build an application that's something like a mini Etherscan clone. So let's take a look at what we will be building and what the requirements are. Right, so this is going to be the final application. We have something like a header, a nav bar, an area where you can search for a transaction or a hash on the main home screen. So we will have two pages. One is the transactions page. It should be a next application, by the way. But anyway, one is a transactions page and one is a transaction details page. In the transactions page, we should have a list of transactions. That's the only requirement. So we'll be using a data table that's part of Moralis UI. So where you can search, filter, sort, and paginate as well, all in one. So we'll be using a data table to show a list of recent transactions, and this will be fetched by the Moralis API. We don't need to do that. We can just use dummy data, but we'll actually fetch real transactions. You can fetch them. You can click on this one right there, or you can search for one. And when you click on it or search again, it will take you to the transactions details page, where you can actually see the details of the transaction. So let's dive right in and get started with the build. All right, so go to your projects directory and in there, create a folder, whatever you want to call it. You can call it an Etherscan clone. You can call it just a blockchain explorer. I'll be naming it Biconomy front-end interview. Create a folder, empty folder inside of it, open your terminal, and we will be creating a next application. So to do that, follow me, write npx create next app, and we want to tell it to do it in the current directory. So you can give it a folder, for example, whatever folder, and it will create that folder in this folder right there, and then create the next application in there. But we'll tell it to do it in the current directory. So press enter. It might give us some options like, okay, yes. All right, so while that's happening, let's just talk about what our application will look like, the structure of it, right? So one thing that's common in both sides of the application or both pages is this is the main page. And when you go to like the transaction details page, you notice the top side is repeating, right? So we will create a layout, and that layout will have the header. It will have this text right there, which is centered. It will be part of this background component as well. So this background component has a background color. It has this arc right there, similar to this design where I got it from. Yeah, it has that arc and it has some moving bubbles. And for the moving bubbles, I will give you a folder that has all three of this. So the animated background, the moving bubbles, meaning the arc shape, right? The arc shape and the barcode. You might want to take it from the GitHub link in the description. But if you want different bubbles or something, this is where I generated it from as well. So it's this loading.io backgrounds, and you can select like what kind of background you want. I selected the bubbles. I gave it a different color palettes, and you can set the size, the speed, the height. You can set the background as well if you want there to be a background or you want it to be transparent. So I set it to transparent. And if you want to save this asset, here's the trick, right? If you want to save this asset, you'll have to pay for it. So what I did was I downloaded an extension called SVG Export. You can Google that. But when you click on it, it will give you like a list of all the SVGs on the page. So this is the one that was the main one, right? The main one. And you can just save it. So yeah, that's kind of like a hack that they might solve later. But yeah, you can do that for now, or you can take it from the assets that's in the GitHub, right? This is the only three things that you'll need to get started. So let's go back here. It created the next application. Let me open it in VS Code now. Right, close that, and we have our next application. Right here, let me do an npm run dev just to see if it runs. Wait, let me make it full screen. Terminal, new terminal, npm run dev. So port 3001, localhost 3001, let's go there, localhost 3001. And yeah, for the first time, usually it takes a while just because it's probably building or compiling stuff in the background for the first time. But there we go, we have our next application that's running. We might want to install a few packages, just something that will help us in our application. So one is, again, Moralis' API, right, their SDK. Another is Moralis UI, that will be our design library. Another will be, so if you go back there, we can let this load. Another will be like this way where we can parse the time, the blockchain time. So this will be like 25 seconds ago. I'll use the date FNCS library for that. Yeah, we'll see what else we need, but let's start installing those three. So let me go to MUI, get started, installation, let's copy that, stop the project, so paste that. We will also need icons. I don't know if we'll need, but let's just install it just in case we do need it. Icons, space icons. We will also need to install Moralis as well, so let me do that. Wait. Yeah. Space, type that in Moralis web3 / common AVM tools. And also to support Next.js as well, we will need another one called that one. And date FNCS. So let me install that. We probably might need ethers. I don't think Moralis will automatically install ethers, but if it doesn't, let's just install ethers. We will also need the Moralis actual package as well. So I should have organized this better. For Moralis package, and then what else? The data table, right? So if you search for table right there, wait, not tabs, table, we do see a data table right there, and you have to install the data grid package as well. So to do that, again, it's just MUI/X/ sorry dash. Let's just type it in. That right, MUI/X data grid, and press enter. Let it install everything. If we need to install anything else, we'll do it later. Probably like if you want a theme for dark and light theme as well with Next.js, you might want to install the emotion cache and maybe in emotion server as well, since Material UI uses emotion styling. So you might need to do that, but we'll just have one theme, a light theme, and I won't go into like proper technicals for that. But let that install and we'll come back. All right, that's installed. Final part of this project setup, let's just create a folder structure. So create a new folder called source, and we'll have everything in there. So a couple of things that we'll need in source, we'll need some assets, which are those images. Inside the assets, let's just create a folder called images as well. Going back to the source, let's create another folder called components, another folder called, we'll probably have some theme config, right? So to use Biconomy's color, it's going to be this orange right there. So we will create a theme config, right? Another thing, utils as well, maybe to have some helper functions or to have some like dummy data, for example. Another one we'll require is the context. We might have some context. I don't think we'll actually use it for something important, but I always like having like context API set up on my project, so we might just set up a context API. What else will we have? We'll have some hooks. One hook specifically where like basically we get to see how much we've scrolled on the page. So if you look at the nav bar, it's transparent in the beginning, but once you scroll to a certain amount, it changes color. So it changes into a solid orange, right? So we'll have like a hook to see how much we've scrolled on the page. But yeah, I think that's it, right? Under the images, you might want to copy some of the images, right? So this is our project images. You might want to copy some of the 3 images that we have that I have on the GitHub. Just copy and paste them in there. And yeah, I think that's it for the project setup. Let's get started with creating the theme, and yeah, and we'll see, and probably like a couple pages as well. Alrighty, so in this section, let's actually do 2 things. One is we set up Material UI with the theming as well, and let's do it the correct way. So if you go into the getting started in their docs and then select example projects, you'll see Next.js right there. Open it, and in there, they have a basic starter template. And the reason I'm doing this is because with Next.js, since it renders in the server, you might run into issues where your theme does not load. And not just the themes, but basic styles in general as well. So you might want to do it like you might want to do exactly what I'm doing here. And after we complete the theming, we'll also set a Moralis. And just if you don't have a Moralis account, go into the Moralis homepage, create an account, and then under the APIs, you'll have to copy your API key, and we'll set that up as well. But let's start Material UI first. So go into their repo, select pages. Let's actually see what else we might have to install, right? All right, so let's actually install the emotion cache and the emotion server as well. So go back there. npm I emotion cache and the server as well. I think those are the 2 things that we're missing, nothing else. And once that's done, let's open our pages. Go into app.js. I don't think we'll need any global styles. Actually, where are the styles located? So in the globals, let's remove everything, and just by default, I think there's a small margin around the page, so let's just get rid of that margin as well. Margin 0, save, that's it. And inside the index as well, I'll get rid of everything, just have an RFCE. a blank. Yeah, let me just save that and we'll do this later. Let me just call this home maybe. See, okay, but that's installed. Let me npm run dev. We don't need the home.module, so let's delete that as well. I think everything else is fine. If you want to change your favicon icon, which is this icon over there, you can just replace it with the image you want. But once this loads, there we go. We have the home written, and let's actually create the theme. And yeah, under the source config, let's create two new files. One is called theme. Actually, let's create a theme folder just to like arrange it more. Theme, and then inside of it, index.js. And if you go back to this repo, right? If you look at the way they created their theme, you have the theme.js, which is going to be our index.js, but they've also have the create emotion cache, and let's just do that as well. So let's copy the same name, new file, and then let's paste this in there. All right, save. Let's close that, and inside our theme, I don't think we'll need all of this, so let's just create our own theme, right? So import, we'll have to import something from at MUI / material, okay? And let's import the create theme. Yeah, there we go. Create theme, and then const theme is equal to create theme. Let's actually create a theme in there. We pass an object. And all we'll have to do for now with this is just a basic palette, where in there, it's another object that takes in like primary, which has a main color, right? And the same for second. We'll ignore secondary. We just need to change the main primary color to orange, which is this right there. This right there. And I'll also have another custom variable called light, so which is a lighter orange. And for a text as well, by default, I think it's a dark gray text. So by default, it's this text color. We might want to create an invert color as well. So again, a custom invert, and let's make that not white, but a lighter white. So F8, F8, F8. That will do. I think that's enough for our theme. Let's just export default theme. Okay, export done. So we've created our theme. We might have to like do the provider next. So under the app.js, right, where is it? App.js, we might want to do a theme provider. So let's return something. Okay, theme provider from UI material. That theme provider, and we have to pass it the theme which we just created. So theme is equal to theme. So let's import that. So import theme from source / config / theme. Import that there. What else do we need? We'll need a cache provider as well. So if we go back to the example projects, let's go back into Trial next. Let's go pages and then app, right? We have to wrap everything with the cache provider as well. So let's do that. Cache provider, and then the value is, what's the value? Okay, let's bring it in from the props as well. I'll change that to props, right? And then let's do that as well. I guess you can just copy the entire app.js, but create emotion cache, that did not import. So it comes from our source as well. So let's import that as well. So import create emotion cache from source config theme create emotion cache. There we go. What else do we need? A head is often as good for SEO, so you might want to do that, you might not want to, but we'll need a CSS baseline. And with Material UI, basically CSS baseline is what jumpstarts the entire like CSS. So you kind of need that, because without it, none of the styles would load, right? So this component right there that comes from Material UI actually passes, gives like loads the entire like style shit that we have. But let's save it and let's see if like everything works fine. I think that's all right. So we have the emotion cache. did the cache provider, we did the theme provider, we did that. I think that's all. So let me go into our browser again, start that, refresh it. That worked. And if I just change it to dark theme, let's see if that works, right? So let's go back to theme. Where is it? Theme. I think it's up. Is it there? Mode, dark, save. There we go. So dark theme works, and now our styles are loaded, right? So let me get rid of that. We'll be using a light theme, and yeah, we've loaded our styles. We've loaded Material UI, and just something else as well. If you use a dark theme, right? If you want to use a dark theme, not just something small, right? So when I refresh the page, it kind of flickers, right? From a light to a dark. Do you see that flicker? Right? If you want to like fix that flicker, what you want to do is go back, copy the document. So the document as well, I think, if you go back here, we have an app, create a new file called document.js, similar to this, underscore document.js, and copy everything in there. It kind of like loads everything from the cache as well into your document, into your app, and it preloads it. So that flicker won't happen, because right now what happens is, by default, it's light theme, and then that flickers basically in that millisecond. It fetches what was stored, which was a dark theme. So to get rid of that, you might just want to like copy the document file, but I won't be doing that since I'll just be using light theme, and that's okay. But yeah, let's set up a Moralis as well, and create two files. So create two files. One is called .env, which will be a production, and one is called .env.local. .local, which we'll be using locally. And inside of it, we'll have one variable called Moralis API key equals to something, and it will be equal to that key right there. So copy it. Okay, copy it, paste it there, and I'll do the same here as well. Paste it. I'll pause the video, paste it, and then unpause it. I don't want to reveal my key, so yeah. All right, so that's done. What you want to do next is inside the server, so inside the API, we will set up. So it's in the Moralis docs, right? So if you just search for something Moralis Next.js, quick start, and then just follow this exact same file, as in this exact same article, and it will teach you how to set up Moralis for your next app. And what you want to do is we'll just have to copy this, right? So copy that under the pages Moralis. So let's copy that file name first of all. API new file .js, and inside of it, let's copy that. Save it. So remember, this is the environment file, the environment variable that we created. Save that, and we have Moralis set up for like our next server as well. So now we can use Moralis on our application, and that's it for the setup. Next, what we want to do is create the layout section. So we'll have a layout for our application where every page will use a layout, and that layout will consist of this background section. By the way, if you notice, the section has kind of like a gradient where it's darker on the left side and lighter on the right side. And then we have this nav bar as well, and then this text and the search bar, the search section as well. So this will be our entire layout, and let's start coding that. All right, close everything that we have, maybe. Let's go into components. Let's create a new folder called layouts, and inside of it, index.js, rfce, let's name that layout, save it. And the way we'll use our layout is we'll surround our app, so the component that we get, which will be the page probably, with the layout. So let's try and import that. Oh no, it's capital. Layout, layout. All right, so we are going to go, like, we're going to have every subcomponent to every page inside the layout. We're going to pass it in as a child. So we can do something like this, for example, get the children. Okay, and then div, let's say we have like a p tag, let's say we have a p tag with some text, and then something else maybe, and then towards the end we have a children, so all the children go there. And the way this works is like on every page it will show this first and then render the child under it. So if you go back here, see, so the home is a child, an empty route, which is just a slash, will be the home page, there will be the child. And let's actually create the pages as well. So inside of this, we want to have two pages, right? One will be the transactions. Actually, we can just, instead of creating the folder, I'll just do this. So transactions.js, rfce, transactions. And then the second will be a folder called transaction details. Okay. And inside of it will be the ID. So we'll say ID .js. So the link will have an ID of the transaction detail that we want to see. Again, RFCE. Let me just name that as transaction details and save. And now if we go back to /transaction, we should see the transactions page now with the layout. So let's start creating the layout now. So let's close that. Actually, let's leave that open. Maybe, I don't know. Let's close it. Okay. So for the layout, I don't want to div. I'll just do an empty fragment and then the child under it. But inside of it, we'll need a navbar, which we'll import. We will need the header section. So I'll just go like background header maybe. I can't think of a better name. And then finally, we will need the search box. Okay. Search box component, which will be, let me decrease the transparency here. And then go back there. And then how do you do it? Control Alt Z. Alright, so we see our web page in the background as well. And let me see if I can increase the font size as well. There we go. I think this should be better for the video. Right, let's do the navbar now. So under components, new folder, navbar, index.js. You can always just have the file name if you don't want to have it inside the folder. Navbar, save. We will need, what else we'll need? We'll need the BG header. So components, new folder, do that, new file, index.js, RFCE, BG header, close that, and finally the search box. So components, new folder, search box, inside of it, index.js. I should use JSX instead, but yeah, RFCE, search box, save, close. Alright, cool. So let's import each of these. Why wouldn't that import? Okay, save. And then BG header, let's import that. I think I'll have to open it so it shows up there. Okay, BG header, save. And search box, let me keep that open as well. Search box, save, and there we go. So we'll have the header, we'll have the navbar, we'll have the BG header, we'll have the search box. Let's start with the navbar. Alright, so close the rest. Let's go to navbar. So just quickly looking at this, every component that we'll have on the page, or every page that we have on every page, will be surrounded by Material UI's container components. And basically all that does is it centers everything and adds some spacing on the left or a margin on the left and the right. So right and left, both sides. And we'll take a look at this, but the container has a prop called max width. And we can set the max width to be maybe mobile screen. So like the max width will be only from there to there, or a small screen or a medium screen. And this by default is a large screen. If you want there to be less space as well, you can have it as an extra large screen or set your own custom number as well. But we'll surround this with the container. And before that, let's go to Material UI app bar, which is their nav bar. App bar, and I'll use this component, one of these components to do it. But I'll actually write it in, type it in myself. So let's go back to the navbar, and inside of it, the main part will be the app bar, right? App bar, and we want the position to be fixed. And what that means is it should always be at the top, like it shouldn't scroll with the page, so it should always be there. So let's do that. So position equals fixed. Okay, let's save it and see what we get for now. There we go. We have some sort of a navbar layout. We don't want the shadow, so I will say elevation equals to 0, which is the default shadow. You can add the depth of it, like 1, 2, 3, so on. And then let's put some styles in. So I'm going to say take the padding of up and down of the y-index to 3, save, and we have some sort of navbar that looks more like this one, right? More like this. And yeah, we'll do the remaining styles later for like the amounts you scroll and change the background color. So transparency at the start, and when you scroll, change the background to this background color. But navbar, and by default, let's just say BG color, which is the background color, to transparent. Save. So right now it's transparent, and yeah, that's what we want. Inside of it, we will add the container now. So container from material container, and actually I won't have it transparent for now, just so we can see what's going on. Save it. Okay, container, and inside the container I'll just have the left and right text. So the left is the button which is, so I'll just have a stack, which is, let me do the stack. And the stack is basically just a div with a display of flags, right? So I want to set the direction, which will be the flex direction, to be equal to row. Okay, so it should be a row and not a column. There should be some spacing when you're like probably on a tiny screen, so like it shouldn't like, the text shouldn't like overlap. And we want to align each item to the center, and we also want to justify each item to have space between the two. The left side is just going to be a basic, let's do a link, so link, which is next link, and the href would be go back to the home page if you click on it, or actually our home page will be the transaction page, right? Transactions, that should be our home page, but inside of it, let's just do a typography, and it should just say Biconomy. Biconomy as their logo. You can change it to a logo of Biconomy. The link tag by default adds the underline, so we will do a style and say let's remove the text decoration to none. So that will remove the underline if you look at the background, but it will also still have the blue color, which is like a link color. But also let's inherit the color to the default color that we have from the parent. There we go. And let's just make the text bigger as well. So typography, variant, H5, and I think that should be good for the left side. Cool. For the right side, let's go into icons, and let's get a menu icon. Let's search for one. There we go. I'll take that one. Right. So for the right side, I will have an icon button, and inside of it, I will put in that icon. So let me import that in, and then let's put in the menu icon. Save it, and let's see what we get. Right there. There we go. We do get that. Let's maybe increase the font size as well, and make it white as well. So under the icon button, I'm just going to set color to inherit to get the color from the parent, which is going to be all the way to the app bar. The menu icon, let's set some styles. I'm going to set font size by default 30, and probably 30 on a small screen, but when you're on a bigger screen, make it even bigger. So the way we do that is let's import theme, right? So let's import const theme from use theme, and that should come from UI material. Okay, and in here we are going to say if the theme.breakpoints dot up and up by maybe like if it's bigger than a small screen, let's change the font size to maybe 34. Save, and let's see what we get. So right now the font size will be slightly bigger, and when we go to a smaller screen, it should change. So yeah, there we go. So this is slightly bigger, and that it changes. There we go. So I think that should be it for an F-bar component. Let's just do the scrolling bits of it as well. So to do that, I will create a hook called use scroll position. If you just Google it, use scroll position, you do see like many different hooks that you can use, but just copy the first one in. Hook. Where did I copy it from actually? Was it this one? Yeah, there should be somewhere under the source. I think somewhere like you can use a scroll position. Yeah, exactly that. So you can just copy it from my GitHub or type it in as well. But under the hooks folder, source hooks, I'm going to create a new file called use scroll position.js, and inside of it, let's do that. And all this does is basically the use scroll position, the functional component. It has a state, right? By default, it's set to 0. And then on the use effects, basically every time we added event listeners, every time there's a scroll event, okay, it updates the state. And what the update will do is it will just get the window dot position, like as in the Y offset. So how the offset from the top of the page to like where the scroll position is, and set it to the state, right? And it's always good to return it. So basically what the return does is like once we leave the components, it removes the event listener. So let's save this. Let's bring this into our navbar components. The way I'll do that is const scroll position is equal to use scroll Yeah, my VS Code is kind of bugged where like if I close it, so if I open this now, I'll get it. So position, there we go. I saved it. Let me close that back again. And last thing that I want to do is basically the transparent thing again. So where was it? Under the app bar, I will do something, right? So if this is a good syntax that might come in handy for you as well. So if scroll position is less than maybe 70 pixels from the top, okay, we want to like give it all of these styles. And basically there's only going to be one style for now, which is going to be transparent, okay? And that's on a small screen. For a bigger screen as well, let's do the same thing again right here. Okay, so if the screen dot breakpoint dot up is 200, so on a bigger screen, we will copy the same thing that and put that in, but this time we're going to say by 200. So on a bigger screen, if you're 200 pixels from the top, then make it transparent. So right now it's transparent, and let me increase the size. You don't need to do this, but let me go to maybe the transaction page. Okay, let's say box for now. SX height, maybe 200 view height, save. Okay, there we go. So look at this now. Now when you scroll by certain amounts, it's going to make it solid, and if not, it's going to make it transparent. But you do see the text there, right? It's a white text, but you will see it there. Once we have this background component, it's going to make a lot more sense, make it visible. But yeah, there we go, and that's the nav bar done. Let's continue with the background component now. Alrighty, so now we're going to the BG header component, which is right there. I want to start by, how do I start? Let me do this. Let me give it a box, right, which is just a basic div, and that allows us to give it some styles as well. SX, let's give it a BG color, a default BG color of, let me import theme as well. So const theme is equal to use theme. Okay, let's give it a BG color of, and remember our theme is right there, right? So this is our theme. I'll give it a background color of primary.main. Okay, so let's do this. BG color of theme dot palettes dot primary dot main. Okay, let's give it some height as well. So a height of 400 pixels. Let's save and see what we get. There we go. So if you go back here, we have the BG header. I'll get rid of this text, but this is our header component. See how this makes it a lot like better now, right when we scroll. But let's fill that in now. So going back here, I'll get rid of this text. Actually, I'll just leave it in for now. But let's do some more styles. Now we want to add a couple things. We want to add this arc image. We want to add that SVG like image at the background. And we also want to make it a gradient as well, the background a gradient where it's like solid on one side and it changes color to the lighter color that we have on the other side. So let's do all three of those now. So let's go back here. To do the gradient first, I will use, let me do it here. So background image, okay, and this background image will be something. So in here, I will say we will use a linear gradients, okay, of a certain degree, so 134 degrees, and then the color they want to give it is theme dot palette dot primary dot main, and then we have to give it the starting percentage. I'll say start from maybe 10% of from the left side, and for the right side I'll do the same thing again. So let's copy that. Oops, no, wait, this is, wait 1 second, 10%, and then copy that, paste again to all the way to 100%. Let's save and see what we get. That did not work. So that did not work. What's wrong with the syntax? Was it that extra space? I think that worked, right? No? Okay, wait, the syntax should not have that. So save. So wait, three parameters, right? One is the degree, and then the left side, so theme.palette.primary.main, start from 10%, cool. And for the right side, theme.palette.primary.lights this time. Actually, we created a new variable, remember, called lights. And yeah, now you see the color change. Take a look at this. So now it's dark on one side and light on the other side. Next, let's import the two images. So I'll import it right there. Okay, we have the animated background and the arc shape as well. So let's add both of those images. So first image, I will use the Next.js image tag to optimize it best. Okay, the first image will be, it will have a source called the animated background, right? So the animated background, which is this one right there. And then we also have to give it an alt text, good practices as always. So let's just call it animated background bubbles, right? And so let's save that and see what we get for now. There we go. We do see it for now, right? I just want to add some like styles to style, and then let's make it cover the entire width and height. So object fit as cover. Let's make sure it takes out the full width as 100% and the full height as well, 100%. Save. There we go. So I think this is good now, right? We do see this for the arc image as well. So let's go back here. For the arc image, I'll just copy this again. Let's comment this out. Animated bubbles, arc image. Okay, for the arc image, let's bring that in, arc image. And then I'll just rename the alt as well. Arc shape image. Okay, for the styles, it's going to be a bit different. Now, this time we want it to fit exactly in the middle of the background, right? So to do that, what I will do is actually, and also we'll have some text as well, right? We'll have some text that's aligned exactly in the middle of the background. So I'll actually just give the parent component a display of flags, right? So let's go back here. Let's give this, first of all, a position of relative, and I'll explain why. And let's give this a display of flags. Let's make sure the justify content is centered and align items center as well. Save that. And if we have a text right now, it should be right in the middle. I don't select text, but yeah, we'll fix that. We'll see. Okay, so for this image, it should be different stuff now. So I will change the position to absolute. So it's so basically it wait, let me write this. Let me write the styles first, and then I'll explain what happens. Let's make the width as 100%, and then the object fit as contained to maintain the aspect ratio. Save, and see what we get now. So basically, this parent component has a relative positioning, and this inner component has an absolute positioning. So basically, the inner component will be positioned based on the size on the position of the parent component. And we make the bottom 0. So technically, if we remove the position relative now, the bottom will be, that arc image will be at the bottom of the page, but we want it to be at the bottom of its relative component, right? Of its relative parent. So there we go. So now it's centered. And just on a small screen as well, just so like everything doesn't look congested, I'll hide this arc on a small screen. And to do that, I'll just use the hidden components from Mature UI. Do that here. And we will say, let's hide it from maybe SM down. So when you're a smaller screen and down, let's hide it. So if you go back here, do this. Ooh, we have to fix that as well. So let's actually fix that overflow thing. We can get this on overflow hidden, but it shouldn't overflow in the first place. Yeah, if you give this an overflow of hidden, like overflow X of hidden, that will fix it. But just wondering, why is it overflowing in the first place? Because we do give it a maximum width. Oh, I see this here as well. Width, save. Okay, let's go back. All right, there we go. That's fixed. So let me go back to a small screen now. So now if we go into a smaller screen, it's changed, right? That doesn't come. Let me just make it a medium and smaller as well. MD down, let's get rid of it. So there we go. Once you're on a big screen, it will appear. Once you're on a small screen, that arc will go away. There we go. And finally, what are these errors as well? Oh, that's like from back then. Okay, let's clear this. Okay, finally, just that middle text where like it says Blockchain Explorer created by, you can add your name there. So that middle text is going to be a stack now. Stack. Okay, let's put some spacing between the two texts. So spacing of 2. Let's actually add the text first. So typography. Come on, give it to me. Typography. Let's import that. And then in here, I'm going to say Blockchain Explorer and another typography created by Salman Faza. Okay, let's save that and see what we get. It goes all the way there. And why does that happen? I think, okay, so let's make this as a position of absolute. Say it goes in the center, right? Stack sx position of absolute, because right now that arc image pushes it towards the side. So absolute, let's save that. And now it is centered. And let's just say text align to center. So now the text is aligned center. Let's just give it some color and the variant of maybe h3, save, and variant of, actually, like this created by is fine. Let's just do star color. If I do inherit, will that work? Oh no, that wouldn't work because app bar by default gives it white. So let's just say color dot invert. No, text dot invert. Okay, there we go. We created that as well. Let me just copy this as well and edit there. Save. There we go. This is perfectly aligned. This is perfect. So I think that's it for our background component. Finally, let's do the text field component. Okay, so for the text field component, what I'll also do is I'll initiate our context API. And the reason I want to do that is basically if we search for something, let's say I search for something in here. When I click on search, when it goes to the other page, I still want this text to remain, right? So this text will be stored globally in our context API. Okay, so let's actually go there. Let me open our app in the background. Okay, first I'll actually just create a component and then I will create the context API. So let's close this now. Let's close the nav bar, so we don't need it. Going to the search box, let's create our search box now. So first thing that I want to do is I'll use a local state for now. Actually, I want to undo that. There's no need. Okay. What do I start with? I'll start with the container, and inside of the container I'll have a paper. So come on, import. Okay, paper, and then let me just say ABC or like whatever in there. There we go. So if you look at the background, we have a container, right? The container adds some spacing on the left and right, and we have the paper as well. Again, the paper adds some shadows, so I'll get rid of that shadow. So I'll say elevation equals to 0, but this time I want to add some kind of box shadow to it, and it's better to add this in the wait, let me do that here first. It's better to add this in the theming, but I'll just do that here for now. We'll add some kind of box shadow in there, and if you take a look here, there's some kind of shadow behind this paper, right? Paper. So that's a good starting point. Let's actually create the text field now. So I'll say form. Okay, and inside of it I'll say text field. Let's save and see what we get. So yeah, we do get the text field now. Okay, I will add some parent stylings as well first. I'll say display. Why am I not getting suggestions? Display of flags. Let's align everything to the center. Justify content to the center. And I'll also add some padding as well. So let me add some padding of 3 or 5, and let's see how that looks. There we go. I think this should be good, but let's actually finish styling it first. So let's continue with the text field, and then if we need to make any changes, we'll come back there. First of all, the form style width of 100%. Okay, just so the form takes the full width as well, but also for the text field, I will say use the full width. So now the text field is a full width. The variant of outlined is fine. Okay, so there's different variants. If I do filled, it will look like that. If I do outlined, that's the default one. Okay, so that looks like the default one. And then there's going to be a value. Okay, a value which we will bring it from the context API. I'll just say ABC for now. It will have a value. It will have a placeholder, and the placeholder will be something like search hash or transaction. Okay, save that for now. Let me get rid of the value so you can see the placeholder. Placeholder, let me refresh. Okay, there we go. And then finally, we want to add the button, right? So if you go back here, look at how there's a button on this side, right? Which is called an endorsement. So if I search for text field, okay, if I search for text field, if you go lower to somewhere here, so this is a start endorsement, and that's an end endorsement, right? So probably if you like take a look at here, input endorsements. Right, so you can add an icon, and if you look at the code, this is what it will look like. So you can add an end endorsement, an input endorsement, and stuff like that. So let's actually just do that, right? Up here, I will say input props, okay? That will be an object, and let's give it an end endorsements, and let's give it a component, right? So the component, I'll copy it from Material UI. Okay. Input endorsement. Take the button as well. Okay, I'll explain some of this in a bit. Let me just comment that out. And then the search icon, let me just import that as well. You can go into icons and search it by the search icon. Let's save and see what we get. And finally, we do get a search icon. So we're using a button over here, but then we want the button to be colored as well, right? So to do that, I'll say button contained first. It takes a color at the back, like a background color. That's a different variant that Material UI gives us. We will add some styles as well. So we're going to use a min width of a bit, just to like make it button small. By default, there's a min width of a certain pixel. We're going to get rid of that. And then the type is submit. So the button type is submit. So once we click this button, it should trigger the on submit in the form. And let's actually create that as well. So on submit. Okay, let's do a handle submit. And let's create the handle submit function. So const handle submit is equal to something. And let's do E. And to avoid the page from refreshing, so we'll say e.prevent default. So prevent the default action that happens. Okay. And then what you want to do once we click on submit, we want to route to a certain route. So the transaction details / the ID route. So let's do that as well. So let's import const router is equal to use router. Okay, and once that happens, we'll say router push. Okay, transaction details / the ID. Wait, the ID, which is going to be a search term, and let's create a search term. So right now, I'll comment that out, but let's actually create a search term. And to do that, I'll do it inside the context. So creating a global context should be pretty simple. Let's minimize some of this. Let's right click here, and I'll just have a default context, which is going to be index.js, rfce. Actually, I don't even need to do that. So yeah, let me just do rfce just to give me a basic thing, right? So I'll call this maybe state context provider. Remember, we have to wrap our entire app with the state context provider. If you don't know, it should be fairly simple. I'll show it to you. We'll take in some children. Okay, and in here we want to do a couple things, right? First thing is let's have const just one state, maybe search term, set search term is equal to, by default, use state as nothing by default. Okay, and then what you want to do here is called state context. So let's create a context first, right? So const state context is equal to create context. Okay, and what this will give us a provider. So it's a state context dot provider and wrap everything in there. So what do you want to wrap in there? The children. And also we want to pass something to every component. So we want to pass a value, and every component should be able to receive these values. So it can, like for now, it will be able to get the search term or set the search term as well, right? And this will be the search term right there. And I think this should be almost it. Let's just export. Actually, we don't want to do this as default. So let me say exports that, but the default, actually we don't even want anything, but let's say export const use state, just so we don't have to do this in every component. We can just add it here. Is equal to a function and use context, and let's give it the state context, right? Just because we don't like, normally, like if you want to use this context in like this page, for example, you'll have to use context this way, but we can just have it in one place and just import it one time, right? But let's save this. Let's go back to our app.js, and inside the app we can give it the, like we can give all of this our state context provider, wrap everything with that. No, the wrong place there. Am I still in the wrong place? Oh wait. Okay, there we go. Save that, and that's it. Now our app use state is not defined. I'm guessing that's coming from the context. Import, save, there we go, that worked. And all we want to do now is basically get the search term and let's go back to our search box, and all we can do is const import something from the from the context, and to do that from use state context. Okay, and what do you want to import? Oh, a search term and set search term. We want to import those two, and we're going to use it here. So for example, so disable this button if the search term is empty, right? So in the start it's empty, so you see the button is disabled. Let's go here, you'll see the button is disabled, it's not clickable. But if you have something inside the search term, so let's add a value. So value is now going to be the search term. Okay, but also when we change, so let's do this. So on change, okay, we want to update the search term as well. So set search term to e.target.value. Save. There we go. So let's see if this works. There we go. And that works. Remove. That works. That works. Remove. Cool. So we got this working. All we want to do now is move this slightly higher up. So I'll do that from our layout component, right? So I'll surround this with a box. Okay, and import this box right there, and I'll just give it some style. So let's say position relative to, do I don't need to do that? But let's give it a Z index. So make sure it's like above everything else. And let's give it a margin top of -9. There we go. So if I get rid of the Z index, yeah, probably on some browsers, maybe like this image might take a higher index than this search box, but just to be safe, let's give it a Z index of 99 to make sure it's above everything else as well. And there we go. That's it for our header side of it. We have, just to compare, we have the nav bar, we have the background section, and we have this text box done. Finally, it's just creating the 2 pages, and that should be fairly simple as well. So I want to start by creating the transaction details page first, just because it's going to be a lot easier. And then we're going to create the transactions page. And basically for this, remember, we'll need a data table. We'll have to like parse some data as well. Fetching the data will be not complicated, but like we'll have to do that from Moralis as well. So let's actually create this side first. Once we get this page done, and then we'll complete it with the main page. So let's start with, yeah, let's just start. I will go to, let me close this, let me close that, home, I'll close it. We'll actually redirect homepage to transactions later. But in here, I'll do a couple things, right? What do I want to do? Let me start with the actual thing. So I'll say container. Remember, we're surrounding everything with a container. Container, save. Come on. Okay. Transaction. Let me copy this link. Okay, transaction details. So there we go, it's containered, and then let's add some padding on the top and bottom as well. So SX, PY, maybe 5/8, PY8, so there's some spacing on the top, right? And now we have a couple things I want to do, right? If you look at this, okay, we have some sort of like a grid which has a left side and a right side, and then the left side has a certain width and the right side has a certain width as well. So let's create that basic grid. In here, I would say grid, okay, grid container, and that container will have a left side and the right side as well, right? So the left side will be grid item. Let me comment this out. Left, right. Okay, so left side and right side, and let's give it some width as well. So I'll say on the small screen, take up a full width on both as well. So access 12. Okay, let me do this on both sides. Let's just focus on the left side first, right? On a medium screen, let's take a width of 7. So it's out of 12. Remember, a grid has a width out of 12. So on a medium screen, we're taking a width of 7 out of 12. And on a large screen, I'll take a width of 8.5 out of 12. And for the right side, it should be 12 minus 7, which is 5. It should be 12 minus 8.5, which should be 3.5, right? So we have some sort of grid. I'll just say A here and B there, just so we can visualize it now. There we go, A there, B there. Let's do the right side first because it's easier. It's just an image. So let me import that barcode image. Okay, and for the right side, let's take a look. What do we need? Probably nothing. So let's just say I'll just say paper is our box. So just there's that background color maybe. Elevation 0. Save. Let me open this side first. Cannot resolve. Are we watching it from the wrong side? So source, assets, images, and then it's barcode.svg. Save. Okay, no errors. Cool. Inside this paper, I just want to do an image. Import it from next image. Always give it a source, and then also the source would be the barcode image, and then the alt would be just barcode image. Save. There we go. I want to add some sort of like border around actually both this and that, so let's do that. So this border, by the way, I want it to be the same border as this one right there, right? And this is Material UI's action focus border. So you can Google Material UI's like theme object, and I've showed it in a couple of my other videos as well. But theme object, and you will see this exact thing. So let's just give it some paper. As you can, of course, like it will be better if you just add it to the styles, right? So if you just add that border to the styles and then just call it there. So, but I'll just do it. Wait, let me just do it on the styles actually. So no, not here. Config index. I'll give it maybe borders. Actually, let me just do it inside the primary. Border 1 maybe. Let's give it a gray. So gray of maybe 500. I think that should be it. But let's do this. So border 1px solid theme.palettes. No, let's import theme as well. Const theme is equal to use theme, and then theme.palettes.primary.border1. Okay, we do get that border 1. It's slightly darker, but we can change it to maybe gray 200. 300 maybe. I think 200 is good. Okay, gray 300. Cool. That's good. So border 1. Let's make sure everything is centered as well. So, and give it a padding as well. So padding of 3, and then display flex align items. Oops. Align items of center, and then also justify content of center. And I think this should be it. Let's just make sure it takes up a full height. When we have the left side components, we should like compare like the same height and take up the full height. But for now, this is good enough. We have the left side done. Let's do the right side now. No wait, we have the right side done. Let's do the left side now. So on the left side, I will use Material UI's table, and I'll actually copy it all. But if you search table, I'll use this basic table, and then we'll give it some sort of, maybe style it in a way where I think I got it from somewhere here. Yeah, we'll give it the styles from here as well, right? Where like every row, if it's even, it's white. If it's odd, then it's slightly colored. But let's do that. And I actually have it copied. So all you want to do is go here, okay? Copy this entire table container, paste it, and then like change some stuff to like what it looks like mine. So let's copy the table. Paste it. Okay, so ignore everything for now. So let's have a table container. Table container, the components will be a paper. No elevation, so again, no shadow. And then the border would be theme.palette.primary.border1. Okay, let's import the table. We'll get errors, but let's import the table. I'll get rid of this area label. Okay, I'll give it a min width as well. Like again, that's just part. Yeah, we'll do. I'll explain why, because basically when we have this table, right, when you go into small screen, we don't want the text to be congested. Instead, like make this scrollable as well, right? But okay, not that small, but yeah. So we have the min width there, and then the table body as well. Let's import it, and inside of it, I'll create a custom row, right, which is going to be some sort of a style. Let me see. Let's create a custom row component first, and yeah, that's basically the custom row component comes from like that other table, which is styled a bit, right? So if you go here, there's a custom table row, and we'll do something similar there, right? So let me go back here. Okay, so let's create a custom row, and let me copy it actually. Okay, so the custom row, let's import that, but we'll also create a custom like style table row as well. And the custom style table row, again, that comes from the same like file in virtual UI, but basically it's just a styled components. Import this from emotion styled, or here as well. Table row, make sure you import that as well. And all it does is when like basically when it's an odd row, give it a background color of like basically what the hover color is, and if not, the last one like and basically the last one, remove the border. By default there's this border at the bottom, we want to remove that as well. But styled row, styled stuff, yeah, I think this should be good. Loading is not defined. All right, cool. So I will create a state now. This, I know this whole thing is a mess, but just bear with me. Okay, const loading set loading. So basically when we're fetching the data is equal to use state. By default it's true because by default we want to assume that it's fetching the data. So what we're saying is when for the customer we give it a title, right? The title is that hash title. The value, if it is loading, then don't do anything, right? Then don't give it a value. But once it's not loading, then give it a transaction.hash. And this transaction doesn't exist yet, but let's actually create a transaction, right? So const transaction set transaction is equal to use state. And then for now, let's make it empty, right? An empty object. But there we go. So this is what it will be. Let's add some spacing between the two as well. So grid container, where's the grid container? Grid container, there we go. Let's have some spacing of maybe 4. Right, so there's a spacing between the left and right side. And then we just have to populate these values once we fetch it. And now to fetch it, that's where Moralis comes in as well. So we're going to go back to our server now. Remember, our server right there. Let me do all of this for now. We don't need to see the background. Inside the server, which is our API, right? Let's delete the hello. We don't need that. Okay, we initialize Moralis, right? But now we'll also create 2 things. One is transactions.js to get all the transactions of a recent block. And one is transaction.js to get just one specific transaction. And if you've done Node.js, basically it's similar where like you can fetch data here and like return a response, right? And we'll like use a fetch to fetch it on our front end side of it. But right here, we want to like import a couple of things. So let's import Moralis from, we want to require Moralis, and this is from Moralis's doc. So by default, you want to get the defaults for Moralis. You want to import another thing as well. So const the EVM chain, and then require it from the package that we installed, which is this one right there. Copy that, require it from there, and those are the 2 things that we want to import. There we go. All right, we want to do a couple of things. So const Moralis API key is equal to process dot environment dot Moralis API key. Remember we had that in the start of the video. Moralis API key, and the chain, because we're doing it from the live mainnet of Ethereum, we're going to say EVM chain dot Ethereum. Let's do it from Ethereum. Remember the requirements at the start was like to do it from Ethereum, or was it Polygon? Polychain, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It was one of the 2, but yeah, so that we're going to do Ethereum. And finally, we want to export default an async function, and then this is going to be a handler where we can like handle our get and post requests, right? We'll take a request and response, and then we want to do something in here. Let's run everything with a try and catch. So I'll get that syntax, try and catch. And inside the catch, first of all, I'll just console console.log error, and I'll just return response.status of 400, which is the error.json. Okay, now let's try something. Now we want to fetch something from Moralis, and to do that, initially what I want to do is as well, okay, wait, so 1 second, const, let's actually get that ID. So remember, we will give this ID, we want to fetch this transaction, right? So pass this ID, so let's get that hash, we'll call it hash. Actually it will come from the query. Let me explain this. Wow. Okay, so the request will have a query. The request object will have a query property, from that query, we want to destructure something else. The query will destructure the hash that we get, right? And then we also want to initialize Moralis if it is not initialized. And to do that, we say if Moralis.core.is started. So if it's not started, we want to do it, right? So we'll just say Moralis.start, okay? And then we'll say API key, as our Moralis API key. So again, this will only run if it has not started, but once the app is running and the first time it started, it will always be running. Okay, and finally, we just want to give it a response, right? So send back a response. So we're going to say const, the response is equal to, let's await it and let's fetch it from the blockchain. So Moralis dot evm API dot get a transaction dot get transaction. Okay, this is on their docs again. Get transaction. We have to make sure we have to tell where to get the transaction from. So from the chain, and the chain basically, this chain is an object. It will give the name Ethereum. It will give an ID. I think it's 0 or 1 if I'm not mistaken, which is the chain ID. And to get that, it's just chain dot underscore value, which is going to be the chain ID. And the transaction hash is going to be the hash we get from the request. That's it. And once we get that, just return. We can do more checks, of course, like if it exists or not, and if not, then maybe like return back an error, but let's keep it simple. Return the status 200, which is like success, .json, response, save. That's it. So that's our backend side of it. And let's go back on our front end. Let's go that, not here as well, over here. Let's let's actually fetch that now. So what I'll do is create a use effect to fetch the transaction, right? So to fetch the transaction, let's create a use effect. So once we enter this page, we want to get the ID from, so we want to get the ID from there as well. So to do that, we'll get it from router. So const, let's get the ID from router query. I'll import that. Okay, and then const router is equal to use router. Alright, so the router will always have a query. From the query, we want to get the ID. You can also do this where you do query here and then get the ID. Both of them will work, right? The same thing. But okay, so the ID, and now I want to give it a dependency ID. Okay, and in here, if ID exists, then we want to import. Remember, we don't import it if the ID doesn't exist. For example, let's say you're on this page with no ID. We don't import it if the ID does not exist, right? But if the ID exists, let's just do a fetch. Okay, we will say from API. So remember, we want to fetch it from the API. Okay, slash the file name transaction. Okay, API transaction. It'll be good if you have a folder called Moralis. Just like if you want to have, actually I won't do it here, but if you have like many different APIs, create a folder called Moralis and put everything in there. But API transaction, and then we want to give it a parameter, query parameter. Let's give it a hash is equal to the ID, which is that ID that we got on the URL, and that is this ID right there as well, right? ID, and then what we want to do next is then, okay, let's say async, we get a response back. Once we get the response, if the response is okay, all we'll say is const, I'll create a temporary JSON variable is equal to await response. Let's just see if we got a JSON inside JSON. Okay, and then we want to set the transaction to JSON. Okay, and also set the loading to false. And if it's not okay, let's just say we give it a transaction that's something like that's not a valid transaction, we'll just do something else as well. Let's just copy this and then set the transaction to empty just in case and set the loading to false. So we always want to set the loading to false. Like we can do a .then and then set loading to false there as well. But enter. Okay, so I see what's wrong now. Okay, so let's do that here. Oops. Save it, and there we go. So now we're actually fetching it from the blockchain. If we refresh, we do see that transaction hash is this, the block it comes from, who it's from, to where it went, how much value it is, and the gas fee. Now here's the thing, the value is in way and it's not in ether, right? So if you do ether to way, okay, remember so if you take a look at this, like 1 ether equals to this much way, right? So we want to like convert that way into ether, right? So let's do that. So we're going to create some helper functions. I think Moralis has an inbuilt function to like convert values. I just don't know that. I have to search it up, but let's just do it manually. Helpers.js, and inside the helper function, let me control Z those two, right? And we'll import these two. So for the first one, we'll convert the way to Ethereum, and for the second one, we'll convert the gas to Ethereum, right? And we'll import those. But inside the helpers, what I'll do now is, okay, create a function called export const gas to it. Actually, let me just import all of this, right? And actually, let me import everything that I have in my helpers. So the first function is gas to it. It's a way to convert gas to Ethereum, right? It takes in how much gas, the current gas price as well, and then it converts it like gas price to like basically converts the way to it, right? And then we give it a 2 fixed of 7, so not more than 7 decimal places to convert way to it as well. Remember, so gas times gas price gives you the way, and then you convert way to it. And same thing here as well. So to convert way to it, we give it an amount of way, and then times the amount 2 fixed 7. And the last function that I have is basically a smaller string. And what smaller string does is if you go to here, okay, okay, so smaller string, right? This is what it does, right? It takes a long string, it will like give it a starting like string like amounts, a substring, and then the last characters of the string, and replace everything in the middle with dots, right? So what it does is you give it a main string that you have, okay? You take the first number, so the first n characters, right? So by default it's 5, and the last n characters, so by default you take the -4, so the last 4 elements, they give it a number of dots, how many number of dots you want to give it as well. So by default it's 4 dots. And all it does is it takes the first part of the string, so it slices the first part from the first element to the first number, the end as well, so you slice it to the last element, so like -5 for example, and then we just join the two with dots. Okay, so number of dots, and then first, number of dots, last, and that's like the small string. But let's save this, let's import it there, way to it, let's import this as well, gas to it, save it, and everything should look good. There we go. So now we have the value at 0.06 it, and we have the gas as well, the gas used for this it. So we've completed the transaction details page. And finally, to complete the last part of our application, and probably the most complicated one, would be the main transactions page, right? Over here, again, we'll use the data table to fetch all the transactions. We'll parse some transactions, for example, some of this data, make it a bit more readable, make the values a bit more readable as well, and make this a button where you click and it goes to the transaction details page. Now, one thing that I want to do is, when we go to homepage, for example, when we go to homepage, I don't want to allow users to go to the homepage. So if you go to the homepage, by default, redirect them to the transactions page. And you can do that in a couple of ways, where you can use a router, right? You can use, for example, this router, and inside the use effect, redirect them, or you can use server-side props as well, where like before the page is even mounted, it will already redirect them. So let's go to a homepage now. I'll just close all of this maybe. Let's go to a homepage. We don't want to return anything. Let's just like return just maybe something empty. Okay, we don't need to return anything, we'll never come here. But then here what we want to do is say export const get server side props is equal to an async function. Okay, and over here all we want to do is return something. So from the server itself, we just want to return a redirect. Okay, and the redirect again is an object that takes a destination of transactions. Cool. So if I save that now, if we go to /home and press enter, it will always redirect us to transactions. So it will never allow us to go to home. And by the way, you see that flicker again that the styles aren't loaded for like the initial split second. Remember in the start of the video, I said use the documents, that will fix it. Maybe we'll do it towards the end of the video. But let's go back here and let's work on the transactions page now. Let's close that. Let's open two things. One is the transactions right there. And I'll just copy everything there now, and then we'll like change a couple of things, right? We won't take anything from there as well. Let's have this as the basic template for now. And inside, let's close that. And for the transactions page, let's start like by styling it for the start. Okay. Okay, so first let's do a loading state. By default, while we'll assume that it's always fetching the transaction, so set it as true, and then const transactions set transactions use state. Let's say okay, here's what I want to do, right? By default, if we are fetching transactions, okay, I want it to be populated with dummy data, right? For the dummy data, I have some of my own dummy data. I'll just copy it, but then if you do not have dummy data, don't do like you can fill it in later, and I'll explain how you can do it, right? But inside the utils, I'll create a new folder called dummy.js. Inside of it, I'll just paste all like a list of like so many dummy data, right? Probably like not that many. Let's just do a few, maybe like this much. Okay, some dummy data. Even this is way too many, but let's just do that. And by default, I'll give it dummy transactions. Did I not export it? Yeah, I did. Dummy transactions, save. So by default, the transactions will be a dummy transaction. Just so like we don't have an empty table. It looks like our table is populated, but it also gives us an idea that, oh, we're fetching the latest transactions, right? So right there. And then what do I want to do? Again, always have a container. I don't want to like give it the heights now. I'll just say py of 8. Okay, there we go. So we have the transactions there. And to make it look more like this, I will have some text and then the table, right? So some text and then the table. So let's do a stack. Oh God, what did I do? A stack. Okay, the stack could have a spacing of 3 between the text. We want to align the items to the center. And then also want to say text align to the center. Okay, cool. 2 headers in there, 1 typography, and then we'll say latest transactions. Let's put this in the background, right? Latest transactions, copy and paste that, and then just some dummy text. You can do whatever you want in this text really, but I'll just give it some dummy text, right? And so for this one, I will say let's use a variant of header 4, and what else do we need? I don't think we need anything else. Maybe if you look here, okay, it's a slightly bigger text, but also like there's a maximum width to the text. It doesn't go from one end to the other, so we'll just add the maximum width as well. So let's go back here. Let's add some styles to this one now. So, and it's also like a slightly lighter color. So we'll set text equals color equals to text dot secondary, which is slightly lighter now if you look at the background, right? And then variant h6. Okay, slightly bigger text, but then also some styles. It's too thick now, so also so fonts weight 400, and then max width of 700. So there we go. It looks a lot more like this now, right? Yeah, a lot more. Cool. And finally, let's just add the data table. And for the tables, like let's go into data tables and just copy and paste this. Let's do it under paper, inside a paper, and then inside of it a data grid. Let me comment those out and see what we get for now. Okay, so we do have to give it some rows and some columns, right? So let's give it some empty. Actually, no, we can just give it some transactions since we have dummy transactions, but you can just give it an empty. Okay, what do I give it for columns? What if I give it an empty? I just want to see it work first. Empty column. Okay, there we go. So we have our basic data table. I'll just add some spacing and stuff around, like style it just a little bit. And to do that, sx height. Let me give it a height of maybe 800, right? And then some margin at the top of margin 5. Save, and then let's try and like fill all of the stuff in, right? So now we have to actually go back to our backend and fetch all the transactions. So there's a couple things to do this, right? So first, this was to initialize Moralis if it's not initialized. But what you want to do first is you want to get the latest block, right? Get the latest block. And if you don't understand how this works, let's go into Etherscan and I'll show you. Etherscan.io, and basically when you make a transaction, or like when there's transactions happening in the blockchain ecosystem on the Ethereum blockchain, they all go inside a block, right? One block, let's say this block has many number of transactions, right? It has like so many transactions inside of it. So if you go back there, all of the, let's say this is the latest block, all of these transactions that you see will be coming from this block as well. So you can't just get the transactions like directly. You get the block number, and together you get the latest block, and then you get the transactions inside the block, right? So let's do that. So firstly, let me go back here. Firstly, I want to get the block, right? I want to get the block. Let's actually do that. So const, I'll create a temporary variable for now. Latest block is equal to await, and we want to get from Moralis dot evm api dot block this time dot get date to block. So what we're doing here is we're getting a block number from a date that we give it, right? You can't just get it the latest block. You give it a date, and it will tell you which block belongs in that date. And what do you want to do now? When I say date is the date dot now. So we just want to give it the current date. So this will be the latest date, which will give it the latest block. And the chain would be similar to that one. So it will be chain is chain. So I think it's something like this, right? So 0 times 1. That's like the Ethereum mainnet chain. And if you go here, this chain dot underscore value is the same thing as this one right there. So actually, I'll just do this time, and we know just to know that it's the same thing, right? This is like Ethereum mainnet chain, latest block, and now also want to say const latest block. Remember this. So okay, so this thing right here will give us an object with many different information. I just want the block number, right? So that's why I made this as a temporary variable. And this time, let me just do this. Latest block is equal to latest block dot to JSON dot the block number. Okay, so now this will actually give us the latest block number. Okay, so this is latest block number. Okay, in there, let's create a new like temporary, like not a temporary variable, but something that will like fill in. Block info is equal to an empty object, and we'll fill all of this in, right? So what I want to do now is let's get some block data. So over here we just got the block number, and I want to get the block data, right? So get the latest block data. Okay, and in there let's do something. So we'll say const block data is equal to await Moralis dot evm api dot block dot get the block. So remember, over here we're just getting the block from a date, and now we're actually getting what's the data of the block, right? Same thing, you give it a chain. I'll just copy that. Okay, and then there's another thing, block number or hash, right? And this will be the latest block number. There we go. And this will give us like a lot of like information of the block, right? For example, like how many transactions it has, how much gas was used in this block, the miner of the block, the timestamp of the block, but also a list of transactions in that block, right? So what I'll do is now I'll do something over here, right? I'll paste that in. This is the block info. Okay, so I'll say block info dot block. Okay, so all I'll do is something like this. You'll look something like block will be something, and transactions will be something like that. This is what it will look like, right? So we're saying block info dot block is equal to this object that has like a block. Now I don't think we'll even need this. We won't use it in our front end, but it's just good to like have this information. So we'll just have like the block data dot to JSON dot number, and then like the transaction count, the gas use, the miner, and the timestamp. And now we'll also get the transactions, right? So this will be the block info, block transactions. So for the transactions, all we want to do is just parse something. So all we'll say is, let me do this. So block info dot transactions is equal to something. We'll say the block data dot, I think it's transactions. Let me confirm. Wait, to JSON first. Dot transactions. Okay, yeah, so transactions, and this will give us all the transactions. But if you go into Etherscan, if you look at like each block, there'll be so many transactions that's of value 0, right? So it has like no value at all. So we just want to filter something. Wait, it's not transactions. We just want to filter like values that are more than 0, right? So the amounts that's been transferred in that block or in that transaction is more than 0. So just say filter. Okay, I dot value is greater than 0. Right, that's all we want to do. And then towards the end, all we want to do is return this block info, and that will work. There we go. So now we've done the transactions backend. Let's go back here and let's just fetch them now. Actually, not back here, but back here. Let's fetch them now. All right, so let's do a use effect. Use effect. So every time we run this page first, now what we want to do is like want to run a function every couple seconds, maybe every 30 seconds. And by the way, if you don't have Moralis, like a paid Moralis, you might have to add, actually, let me do this now, right? You might just want to add a transaction, like a timeout somewhere over here, because like if you call this, you get like maybe like, you can't call it like twice. Okay, so once you call an EVM block or something, if you call this function, you have to wait at least a second before calling another function, right? If you don't wait that second, you'll get a timeout error, like saying like you don't have the rate, or like on a free account, you can't like do like multiple, you can't call multiple like Moralis functions within a second. So all we'll do is like just create a timeout function, and you can Stack Overflow it or Google it. It's pretty simple. Let's just create a default timeout function. All this does is it's a promise like that you can use inside an async function, and it just like resolves a set timeout of a milliseconds you pass it in. So maybe like 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, and let's just do something maybe over here, right? So I'll say a timeout to prevent Moralis rate limit, and pretty simple. We just want to await timeout, and then maybe give it a second. Okay, so get this function after a second, do the rest. If you still get the timeout, maybe just increase it to 2 seconds or 5 seconds or something. But I think a second has worked for me, so I'll stick to that. All right, so inside the use effect now, let's create a function. I'll create a const fetch transactions is equal to a function, and then let's do something in here. We want to set loading. So every time we start fetching the transaction, we want to set loading to true, right? And then we want to do a fetch in here. So fetch API / transactions, and then remember we're not like giving it any like value. So then okay, on a sync, I will get a response. Inside the response, we want to like convert the data we get into a JSON. Okay, so similar here, it's better to do it like this way as well, like if if response.is okay or something, or response.okay, then convert it to JSON. But I'm just going to assume we don't get any error. Okay, and then const, let's create current transactions is equal to JSON dot transactions dot map, right? Let's say we get, let's do that just in case you don't get this is an error, right? Dot map, and then we'll have maybe a transaction, maybe an index as well, an index, and I want to return something. So what do you want to return? I'll return an ID. Our data table requires an ID, right? So return an ID of IDX plus 1. So this is just a map ID, so it starts from 0, 1 to as many transactions they are. And I want to return something. A hash is t.hash, okay, which is this t, okay. And then what else? The block is t.block number, okay. And then the timestamp is going to be something now, right? So I'm going to leave that as empty for now. But then there's going to be a from address, to address, value, gas fee. So I'm just going to copy and paste those in. Okay, so from address, remember the smaller string function that we created that splits a string into something smaller right there? This one right there, we talked about it. So let's import that, and then let's import weight to it, and then gas to it as well. Finally, yeah, done. Now, we installed date FNCS, and for date FNCS, we want to like use something like this. So I want to do something like maybe 20 seconds ago or 16 seconds ago. Since all of these are the same block, so it's always going to be the same timestamp, but 16 seconds ago, right? So let me go back here. Okay, for the timestamp, there's something the date FNCS gives us, which is called format distance strict. Okay, and it takes a couple of things. It takes the starting new date. So wait, the current one, sorry, like the timestamp we want to give it, and then t.block underscore timestamp. Okay, the second parameter is like to where, so new date. So difference from, oops. So difference from this one to this one, and then finally The third one is we want to add a suffix. I want to select ago. So right now it will just give us maybe like 19, but we want to like say seconds ago and stuff, right? So the last one is just options. So we will say add suffix as true, and then finally include seconds as true. So include seconds is basically like by default it doesn't give us seconds, so it will just say 1 minute ago or less than a minute ago. So if you include seconds, it will give you the exact seconds as well. Save it, and we get the like we've parsed the transactions. Finally, all we want to do is like set the transactions. So set this transactions to these transactions, and let's set the loading to false. All right. So we created this fetch transaction inside the use effect. What you want to do now is when you first land on the page, we always want to run this function for the first time, but also we want to set an interval. So const interval, just a variable name, is equal to set interval, and then inside the interval I just want to run this function, so I'll just do that. Set interval, and then we want to do it maybe every 30 seconds, so times milliseconds, so times 1,000, so that's 30,000. So, and once we leave this page, we want to return it. We want to clear that interval as well, right? So I want to return a function that clear interval, and which interval it is? It's just this one. So we don't want to keep running this function throughout your application, only when we run this page. And once we leave this page, we want to return it, so we want to clear that interval. So remember, if you don't know this, in use effect, it runs stuff, but once you leave the page, it runs the return. So just before you leave the page or the component to like return, it will run the return function. So let's save that. And then let's refresh, hopefully no errors. Whew. Okay, and all we want to do now is give it some columns as well. So we gave it rows, but we didn't give it columns, right? So once we give it some columns, that's all we'll need. So for the columns, let's create a constant variable. Const columns is equal to something. And inside the columns, there's going to be an object like that. So first of all, like the first object is going to be a field of ID. We can give it the header name. So remember, this ID, this field name should match the row field name, which is this one right there. So ID hash block timestamp from address to address value feed, right? So those are like the field names. Okay. Let me do some of this as well. Copy it and paste it. So we don't want it to be filterable. Like you can set it to true if you want. I just give it some default widths as well. And the middle one, which is the hash, okay, I want to do something else. So the field is going to be hash. Okay, the header name is going to be txn hash. Okay, but instead, like let's give it a width as well. Width of 230. Okay, filterable false. I don't want it to be filterable. But finally, we want to render some custom thing inside the cell, right? Render cell. And then we will set params, and then let's return something. So we'll return a link. Okay, the next link, and then inside of it, let's just return. I'll just copy and paste it, right? So we'll return something, transaction details, link. We imported it. We imported smaller string as well. Now this params right here, each column will have some params, right? Some params are basically like the settings of the column, right? And then it's inside of it, there'll be a value as well. So that value is this thing right there, right? So this is the field name, and this is its value, right? So that's from the data table. 1 second. That's from the data table. It'll take some value, and the text decoration is again to get rid of the underline. But let's save this and let's see what we get. Let's pass the columns in. Save, and there we go. There we go. So refresh, and yeah, that worked. Let's slightly make it like slightly better as well. So we will say, just give the rows columns, and then we don't want the checkbox selection. I don't think that's necessary. And I will just say auto page size. Okay, we will say loading. So basically, loading. So when it's loading, so by default, do the loading spinner. And that's it. So every 30 seconds, maybe let me change that to every second for now, just so you can see. So maybe every 10 seconds. So there we go. The first time it will run it, right? So the first time we always run it. Okay, we always run it. And then every 10 seconds, it will run the function again. So hopefully in a few seconds now, it should set the loading to true and run this again. It does not do it. Oh wait, okay, now it will. So let me just do it to 5 seconds now, right? Save. So that's it. So once done, now 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, yeah, there we go. So every 5 seconds. So yeah, this was the latest block and it only had this many transactions in there. But let's change it back to 10 seconds. And there we go. So we have the main homepage done, right? So this was the main homepage done. And when you click on each item, it will go there and fetch the current hash that we opened. When we go back to the homepage, it goes back to the homepage, it fetches it, and we get everything that we need. It also has like pagination as well. So maybe this block had like this many transactions. So 166, so it paginates automatically. And the next block, again, the latest one fetched had 72. So yeah, it shows real-time transactions. If, for example, I copy that, go back to the homepage, do this, press enter. We didn't do this one yet, so let's just go back to that components. Search box. Save this, and then if I do that, press enter, it goes to that page. If I go back to the home page, there we go. You can always like clear this if you want, just import from the state, and when you go back to the home page, clear this item. But yeah, thanks for watching, and that's it for the entire video.